I've come to the conclusion that if my wife and I were to win the lottery, I would have to hire a lawyer and an accountant. I would also hire Mr. Robertson to watch said lawyer and said accountant. Mr. Robertson, because of his honesty and integrity, is no doubt in my mind, he would not steal.
You're watching WGSR 47, serving Reidsville, North Carolina, Southside, Virginia, and Piedmont, North Carolina.
I know that you're a good person, so I just wanted to come by and let you know that I know this. That's all. That's all. Okay, so God bless you. Okay, you have a good day.
You're watching WGSR 47, serving Reidsville, North Carolina, Southside, Virginia, and Piedmont, North Carolina.
I know that you're a good person, so I just wanted to come by and let you know that I know this. That's all. That's all. Okay, so God bless you. Okay, you have a good day.
The views expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect the views of the station, its employees, or ownership.
Thank you for joining me tonight. I'm Johnny Robertson. We're live here on What's the Bible Say. We have information, as usual, that we think will be a deciding factor in possibly the way you look at different things. And so tonight we hope that you are at least prepared to get your Bible out and pay a little bit of attention. Give you a chance to get your Bible out while I talk to you just a moment. We meet at 823 Starling Avenue, Sundays 9, 10, 11. And those are different times where we're together either studying the Bible. 11 o'clock is when generally everybody comes together for worship. 7 p.m. on Wednesday night. And we always want you to know that you can get in touch with us, 276-806-2150. That's my cell phone number. You can remember that tonight. 276-806-2150. Micah's cell phone number, 434-429-5221. We'll put that up again later on in the show. Also, Caleb, you can get in touch with him, 276-806-3641. These are cell phone numbers. They're always on. You're always able to reach us. If you can't reach us, if you decide you don't want to reach us that way, then religiousreview@gmail.com. That's Religious Review. Religious Review. It's a system that we follow, reviewing churches, so you don't have to. Sometimes you just can't get the information that you want. And so we try our very best to go out into the community, talk to different religious groups, talk to different, and I mean, when we talk about religious groups, I'm talking about Muslims, Nation of Islam Muslims, regular Muslims, new Nation of Islam, just you name it. We're trying to get into that information, and you can email us at religiousreview@gmail.com and ask us a question or get us even, maybe to do a show for you. Something that you might be interested in tonight. As we think about our broadcast, I want to begin tonight with a little bit of information here about folk that populate our area and also give you a chance to just see the options that are out there. This is a gentleman who is in the Nation of Islam. Now, the reason I'm playing him tonight is I want to begin our broadcast with something that's current. He's current. He challenged Caleb about 3 weeks ago. Then he backed out. He's never going to come on in a situation where he isn't some way or other getting himself an advantage. Now, I don't, I kind of wonder about these guys. They always are looking for an advantage. I mean, we're giving out free airtime when you really get down to it. This is the local, not representative of the Nation of Islam. He promotes himself as a representative of the Nation of Islam, but he really is not an imam in any particular town that I know of. He's never, since being dispensed with back in, 2000, I couldn't even tell you when he found himself embroiled in a great controversy out of which he ended up finding himself in prison. Then he was let go. Somebody else was charged with the crime. He never has been recognized as any kind of leadership for the Nation of Islam, but he is the most vocal and is, I would say, the most viewed as far as any time there's a mix-up, he's going to insert himself into it. His name is Malvester, and as I say, he challenged Caleb a couple of weeks ago. He's backed out. He challenged me to debate, I don't know how many years ago. It took him 10 years to finally come on television, and he wanted to have Star News moderate the discussion, which basically means that it ends up being a TV event from the standpoint that Star News gets to ask questions and one of their hosts becomes the moderator, which in itself means that they're trying to make it more like TV. They want it to be entertaining. Now, folks, our debates are entertaining. We have very good discussions. We have a format where we give our guests 10 minutes without any interruption. Then we answer them for 10 minutes. They go for 10 minutes. We answer them for 10 minutes. They go for 10 minutes. We answer them again for 10 minutes. Then we have a segment where we open up the phone lines and we let the community ask us anything they want to. Generally, that goes for like 15 minutes. You call in and you cannot stay on the phone for more than 2 minutes. You can ask Malvester any question. You can ask me any question, or whatever individual that happens to be on. I don't even know how many times we've done this, but we've done it several. And everybody, it works great. The individuals who've come on, that none of them have complained. The only complaint they've had that I can remember is Dan Parker complained about not having enough time in 10 minutes. But hey, you know what? I don't want to bore you, the listener. More than 10 minutes of me or Dan Parker on a particular subject, I don't really think that you can comprehend much more than 10 minutes of intense information. So here's basically let you listen tonight to one of the persons who are opportunistic, who are saying that, oh, if you give it to us, if you give the town to us, if you give over to us, we'll figure your problems out, we'll fix it. So let's listen to Malvester, and I want you to see if Islam, the Nation of Islam, do you think they can fix Danville? Take a listen. I'm going to let you listen to him and listen to his founder. Take a listen, and Matt, you can go ahead and X me out of this.
They were not his wives. Can already deal with that, and Johnny always trying to pull a dead man up to fight a living man.
You're pulling dead men up?
Leave that alone.
Then you leave the Honorable Elijah Muhammad out of it. He's dead.
No, you're not. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad is living. On the wheel, which y'all call a UFO?
Yeah.
On the wheel.
Man, I hope this is going. On the wheel, on the UFO.
Yeah, not a UFO, on the wheel. There's a half a mile by a half a mile, and they got 1,500 little wheels on it that's going to control. Whenever they start throwing some bombs, watch them wheels come down.
Okay, then.
They won't throw them.
What are you talking about?
The wheels is up there to protect the black people.
The wheels.
Yeah.
Black, we the only ones that's going to protect.
Okay, here we go,
You know
Matt.
what? White folks don't need nobody to protect them. They protect themselves. And white folks don't need you to defend them because they defend themselves very well.
Okay, now you might say, why was nobody's lips moving? Here's the reason. That was during a commercial. I was on with Malvester and Tony. It was a show called Headliners, and Malvester was one of the guests. I'm a regular on the Headliners every Monday night during that time frame. Malvester was one of the guests. We had gone to commercial. That's stuff you'll never hear. I've never heard Malvester talk about the UFO, where Honorable Elijah Muhammad is alive right now. He didn't die. He's up on a UFO. Oh, it's not a UFO. It's a whatever mile, half a mile, and it's got all these 1,500 wheels, and if anybody shoots a bomb at it, those wheels are going to take. Are you kidding me? See, you get to hear this stuff only on What Does the Bible Say. Now, how about that? How about Malvester lead us into the next decade, let's say? Give him the reins, and where will we go? Now, we're going to listen to a little bit more, and we're going to switch over into the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, because it could be that you're like, who is this guy? And what in the world? Is he far out enough? And then you're saying, well, this Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I'm going to give you some footage of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad also, the one who didn't die, who's up on this magnificent half-mile by half-a-mile floating spaceship or UFO or whatever with the 1,500 wheels that just absolutely is it's impregnable, and you're going to get to see both. So let's go ahead and take a listen.
What we are trying to do, I will say this, my veteran, we're trying to get along.
need somebody to
I
defend
really
us.
am trying to get along.
I do that.
Trying to get along.
Yeah, now, not with you necessarily. I wish that I could.
The only way you get along with me, Johnny, is come to the truth. Denounce your father, Yaku, and come to the truth.
The father Yaku is...
Yaku is who made you all.
Okay, this is somebody that was created by a scientist.
Yaku,
right?
Yaku made the Caucasian people from us.
Okay. So,
You are
short
made
of
man.
that...
You're not a created man. The Bible will tell you, let us make man in our image and our likeness. Let us make man.
This is...
Yaku is the father of the Caucasian people.
hold on just a minute. I'll spell it for you. You spell it? 110.
I know. We was revealed the truth that you all don't know. Y'all don't know the knowledge of yourselves.
66 trillion years ago, by the way. Y-A-K-U-B.
Yaku.
Y-A-K-U-B.
Yaku was born in the year of 8,000.
Well, here's what his book says. 6,000 years ago, or to be more exact, 6,600 years ago, as Allah taught me.
Years ago.
You said 8,000 just then.
I say in the year 8,000, Yaku was born, and then he started making the Caucasian people in 8,004, and by the time it took him 600 years to make them, so the year 9,000, the Caucasian people come on the planet. That's the beginning of Caucasian people on this earth.
And so I have to renounce that.
Yeah,
And
you have to denounce his teaching. He taught y'all trick knowledge. He taught y'all to rule the people of color around the world, and you have did that very well. Very well.
never rule China.
All right, we're back here, and one of the things we did a show today where we're...
And the present moon that we have, which is now 66 trillion years old itself, or rather being in the position that it's in. It originally was about 56,000 miles from this part, or rather, when she was taken from this part. It was drawn out of the orbit of that, at that time, 36,000 miles, and that part that we are looking at today, it dropped from the original orbit 12,000 miles, lost all its water on this part. That's why she's without water. It's due to the explosion. At that time, 66 trillion years ago, she lost her water by turning over. She turned all over, and the water dropped on this part. And that give us then 3/4 of our surface covered in water, because we have the water from that part. The original man did that. He was the man, rather we say a god, a scientist, that brought about that explosion due to his dissatisfaction of not being able to have all the people he liked, and having them speaking the same dialect. So he got angry because he could make...
Man, unbelievable. Unbelievable. This is the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. What was he talking about? He was talking about the moon. The moon turned over, or the original earth. You know, it's so difficult to get all of this stuff unraveled. The original earth, or the moon, turned over and emptied her water onto us, onto this planet, and that's how we get 2/3 of the planet being 2/3 water. And he goes on to say that Mars used to be the moon. I mean, this guy is so far out, it's unbelievable. Well, how did that happen? Well, this scientist blew up what was the original planet and separated this part of the planet from what is the moon. A scientist did that, and this scientist also made the Caucasian people. And it's just, you know, it's the information that this guy's dispelling. I mean, and look at this guy. And, you know, and don't be going to the race card either. You know, individuals often will try to make something racial. It wouldn't matter to me if, and the guy who gave this guy his information is a person of Indian descent. And it's just one of the wildest things that you ever heard. And Malvester is promoting this as a means or as a personality that we all should listen to. Malvester is basically saying that Elijah Muhammad is, in fact, the Son of God or is God. I mean, it's, you know, somebody said, he might call in and say, Johnny, that's not exactly what we said. Okay, I have debated this guy. I've debated the new Nation of Islam. And when you really get down to it, it's very difficult to make head nor tails out of what they really say. And the point of bringing them up, why bring them up, is because they're promoting themselves as an option for fixing our problems in, let's just say, for instance, fixing our problems maybe in Danville or in some other area like Martinsville, or maybe the idea of the United States. I got a text from Micah, and he said that Malvester thinks that we ought to have Louis Farrakhan. If you've heard of Louis Farrakhan,
I know.
We ought to have him in the White House. And so let me give you a little update here on how this began, and we're going to try to put it in perspective tonight. This was about 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago.
One more question. I know Malvester Dixon was there last night. What about to that extent? How far do you think your dad is going to go with the Nation of Islam? Because
it was for the community. Why didn't you come and help out?
Now, this personality, Jessica Griffith, she is the one who basically put all of this together. You know, we have the news media saying that Jessica is a person that will save us as well, or at least I think they were just kind of maybe mimicking her. You know, when they were saying that maybe Jessica ought to be the individual that they put forward, or Danville put forward. She's going to help fix things in Danville. And so let me just get that up for you right quick, and we'll give you a chance to see where she was in the media, and they were looking at her as maybe a viable person to rescue us, if you want to put it that way. I'll just forego that, and we'll just get back on topic here. So here's Jessica, and one of the very well-known city councilmen, Mr. Campbell, is being interviewed by Caleb right before his show, and you know, he's questioning, why is it that you inserted Malvester into a meeting that had to do with the community? And this is what you get.
Okay, well, Mark McManus asked Jessica, you know how you answered him?
He was also stalking me and harassing me, driving around, following me as well. So, but y'all continue.
Wah. I mean, she couldn't prove that to save her life. We actually have audio where she was telling us not to come, and yet she wants to know why we didn't come.
You do what you do. I love that y'all talk about me. Use this.
So, Mr. Campbell, what about Nation of Islam? Do you actually think that is going to be helpful to the community?
Transvestites. I want y'all to use that more.
Elijah Muhammad, do you think that's going to be helpful to the community?
Transvestites. I want y'all to use that.
Do you actually think that is going to be helpful to the community?
Transvestites. I want y'all to use that more.
Elijah Muhammad.
Transvestites. I want y'all to use that more.
So he asked Mr. Campbell, do you think that the Nation of Islam will help the situation? And he says, will it hurt? This is a city councilman. Now, you know, and he's also a religious personality. His dad is the chief apostle of the world. And You know, I mean, if you think about having a city councilman, now, folks, I mean, we're at some point we're going to have to get past being politically correct. You have a person who's a city councilman, and you have to think like a city councilman when you're looking at him and when you're thinking about his response. He can't be totally brutally honest about remedies. I mean, you think about this: the Nation of Islam, that is a constituency in Danville, and he knows that if he isn't careful, he will isolate that particular body of his constituency. Now, when you think about how many people, how many votes it takes to become a city council, it's not astronomical. I'm just going to go out on a limb here. I think if you have 1,500 votes in Martinsville, you can become a city council member. That's not a lot of votes. Now, but if you think about this, if you alienate yourself from a large block, you could lose the election fairly easily. And so you might say, well, are you saying that there are 1,500 persons in the Nation of Islam in Danville? I don't know how many Nation of Islam Muslims there are in Danville, but you don't have to have just the Nation of Islam in order to get your vote. It's people that are associated with it. Like, for instance, we have a gentleman that learned the truth and was a member of the congregation in Martinsville. His son was a member of the Nation of Islam. Now, if we just categorically say everything bad about the Nation of Islam, it would have aggravated him. And we do say it. I mean, I don't care if it aggravates anybody for us to tell the truth, but I'm just saying, I know this firsthand. The gentleman's a member of the church with us. His son is in the Nation of Islam. He doesn't want to hear all of the things that we say about the Nation of Islam. As a matter of fact, he's friendly with Malvester. That's just not going to get it. In the sense of, he's not going to be able to be at peace with us if he is at peace with the Nation of Islam. If he's not going to allow us to flat out tell that the Nation of Islam is just totally off their rocker. I mean, the idea that the moon turned over and emptied its water on the earth and Mars used to be our sun. Are you kidding? 66 trillion years ago? Seriously? So you see, what we're saying is, we're not politicians. I did worry about that individual, not to the point where I'm going to stop talking about the Nation of Islam, but not Mr. Campbell. He's not going to be that way. He has to think like a city councilman. Will it hurt to have Malvester as a part of the remedy? Absolutely. It's like pouring oil and water together and saying that we're going to make fuel for our car. Not going to happen. And other individuals are just as bad as Malvester when it comes to their remedies as well. And so tonight, folks, that's what we're putting forth here. We're basically showing you this is what our nation puts forth as a remedy. Or let's just say they put forth Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not going to remedy the problems that our nation has. Now, if you're talking tonight about the possibility of seeing an economical change in America, I don't know. I haven't been to school. I haven't had political science, for one thing. I haven't had economics, and I doubt that Donald Trump has either. You know, to the degree that he's going to really be able to head up an economical a plan for economics, he's going to get some guys that are supposedly the gurus in that particular area. Well, we've already had that in how many different administrations? So I don't know if that's going to be the answer or not. I'm not worried about the economy. What we're worried about is, what does the Bible say? We're talking about eternity here tonight. And so I want to put forward then a possibility that I think individuals need to consider as maybe a remedy. I know you're looking at me right now and you're thinking, what in the world? Who is that? You know, you're looking at him and somebody's going to say, well, that's Martin Luther. That's not Martin Luther. And somebody's going to say, well, Martin Luther is black. No, we're not talking about Martin Luther King. We were saying, is this Martin Luther? No, this is not Martin Luther. Is this Calvin? No, this is not Calvin. Who is this? Well, I can tell you this. Tonight, it could be the case that persons that you don't know could, in fact, help a lot. And things that you might not have considered could, in fact, help a lot. You know, when it comes to things that we have put forward to deliver us, you must realize, for just a moment, when we talk about history, you must realize that historical figures who have been the greatest influence on mankind, stay with me now, historical figures who have actually been the greatest influence on mankind are often unknown to us. They're unknown, maybe unknown to you. You just take, for instance, a Frenchman named Pasteur. Now, you may say, man, you know, I'm 50 years old, 60 years old, and I'm trying to remember back in world history or science or something. That sounds, man, that really sounds familiar. And, you know, you're trying to put it together. And, you know, you have individuals like that are, I mean, their name is so important when it comes to our health or some particular part of medicine, something of that nature, and yet you don't know that much about them. Well, there are a lot of individuals. As a matter of fact, you think about Jesus. Do you think Jesus made the history books? When you start looking historically for Jesus, and during his own time frame, there are only a few mentions of Jesus outside of biblical literature, extra biblical literature, like, say, for instance, Roman rulers or Roman governors or things of that nature. There's only a few extra biblical mentions of Jesus, who has had a greater influence on mankind, the entire world, than Jesus, the Son of God, and who has had more influence on us in other ways, and we don't even realize it. Well, it is the case tonight that if you're listening to me, you probably do know Martin Luther. You've heard of Martin Luther, and you probably have heard of Calvin. And that's, to me, exactly the way the devil works. He wants you to have heard of these individuals. You know, one of the most well-known persons in the world was Muhammad Ali. I mean, you really think about that. How is it that history works? How is it that notoriety actually works? Well, often it is the case that individuals who do not really have that much effect upon the world in a positive way, I'm talking about in the sense of really changing the entire makeup of the world, they are well-known figures in the world. Muhammad Ali, Elvis Presley. I mean, just think about that. Where can you go that Elvis Presley isn't known? Well, my kids would say, well, he's not all that well known. In my lifetime, he was certainly well known all over the world. The Beatles and Muhammad Ali. You see how that works? But what about individuals who you do not realize but actually influence the entire world, and yet their name is never mentioned? Tonight, I want to bring to your thinking process a couple of names, 3 names, that I believe will help you in this great battle that we're involved in that has to do with our soul. Now, tonight, what we really need to do is, when it comes down to things that I think that are important, that have to do with the way that individuals look at things, look at themselves, and look at God, I don't know that there is a more important passage or more important theme than the idea surrounding the myth that we're born in sin. When we read Romans chapter 5, verse 12, you know, we're talking about, when we talk about tonight's program, what are you talking about? We're talking about who can help us in the world. You know, who can help us in our situation. If you think about it, and you think about the things that are going on in Danville, especially because that's where a lot of this information that we're talking about, a lot of the problems that we're talking about, where you have city council, Mr. Campbell, and you have Malvester, and you have Jessica, and all of this, and we're thinking about how can we fix this. Can I tell you tonight that the problem that we're dealing with is the problem that is found in Romans chapter 5, verse 12. The idea that we're born in sin is a perpetuator of many, many evils. When you think about individuals who are raised up in these churches, and they're taught that from the beginning of your creation, from the beginning of your existence, your nature is depraved and you have fallen. You know, when Adam fell, they say, you actually fell in the person of Adam, and you were born with a depraved nature. Now, you say, well, how could that actually be the issue that's causing us so much problems. Listen, folks, this is just like evolution in the way that it is just a dastardly seed that is planted in the minds of individuals. Let me give you an example when we talk about evolution. I have an acquaintance, I have been acquainted with one of the science teachers in Martinsville High School. He's now retired. He was an African-American science teacher. And as soon as I say that, you may say, well, I know who you're talking about. And I'm not going to name his name. That's fine if you do know who I'm talking about. Had a lengthy discussion with him as a result of the fact that we were in the Natural History Museum and we were exposing the faults of evolution, trying to get them to debate with us, demonstrating how fragile they are and how they refuse to even open up the Natural History Museum when we brought in a person in the Church of Christ who has a degree, a PhD in science, microbiology, and they closed the entire museum down. And so we were making the headlines, and the reason we were doing this is to try to demonstrate how terrible evolution is. In what sense, you might say? Well, this particular science teacher, as we were discussing, he told me, he said, Johnny, evolution really has been a huge manipulator of the minds of the African American students that I've taught. And I was saying, well, tell me more about that. And he said, often I would try to get my students to go on to college and to try to reach higher education. He said many of them refused to do it because of the evolution that was taught in our science department. That the African American is actually closer to the chimpanzee on Darwin's scale, and they had actually bought into that their minds weren't as highly developed as the Caucasian race, and many of those individuals just basically did not want to even try for higher education. They just went right on into the factories and didn't even give it a second thought. Now, that came from a science teacher, and I have it on tape, I can prove that, a science teacher in Martinsville. You see the seed that is actually planted in the mind, that and we all supposedly came from a monkey. So let's don't say that that was anything racist. He just simply said on Darwin's scale, and we've showed it, in Darwin's analogy, he's showing that if different ones are closer to the chimpanzee, we all supposedly came from the chimpanzee. Now listen, if you're just an animal, I mean, if you can just prove to people, well, you know, that we're just animals and we don't have a soul and there is no judgment, then what's to stop people from acting like animals? Now, how did we get on evolution when we're talking about born in sin? What's the difference? If you've been told all your life, if you have been it's just been basically bombarded, propaganda put into your head your entire life that your nature is depraved, then how do you feel when you do depraved things? If you've been told all your life that you're just a little devil and you know that you're just simply acting out the way that you are, the way that God made you, why would you do differently? You see what I'm saying? Do you realize how insidious some seed of thought is when it's planted in the mind of a youth, planted in the mind of an individual, and they grow up thinking like that? That's what we're talking about here. Now, we're basically saying Mr. Campbell is a city councilman. He's looking at, well, what would remedy our situation? Well, Islam couldn't hurt. Will it hurt? He didn't say it couldn't hurt. Let me quote him correctly. He just simply wouldn't take a stand. He said, would it hurt? Seriously? An educated individual of his stature, and he doesn't know that the Nation of Islam is built on the buffoonery of Elijah Muhammad? I mean, seriously? These folk are teaching that Elijah Muhammad is still alive on a UFO. Could it hurt? What in the world? I mean, let's get Popeye out here and so let's all start promoting spinach, and we'll be able to be strong enough to dodge the bullets, and you know, we'll really, I mean, that will really help. Could it hurt? How about Popeye? Would it hurt? Could it hurt? Seriously? I mean, but see, that's politics. When you're a politician, you're thinking first about your constituency. But see, we're not in politics. I'm thinking about what will really help our area. And I'm not opposed to bringing down any particular group. I'm for bringing them down if they need to be brought down, which brings us back to our picture. This is a picture of a gentleman whose name is Erasmus. Now you might say, why in the world are we looking at Erasmus? Here is the reason. Folks, you need to realize that it is not the case that all of humanity has been involved in the belief that we are born in sin. It is just simply not the case. Let me give you 3 names tonight that you need to look into, and you will begin to realize that there is a mass of historical evidence associated with individuals who did not believe that we're born in sin. The idea that we actually are tainted as a result of Adam. And let's just go ahead and get into it. I mean, I'm ready to get into it with you. We don't have anybody who will debate us. I mean, everybody in this area, they're a bunch of cowards. I mean, they're scared to death. They've got their well-known, documented historical leaders, John Calvin, Martin Luther. They've got the huge masses of information and places of learning that promote this stuff. And we can't get anybody to champion this evil, foolish, just ridiculous doctrine. And we play time after time, we play individuals that say the most ridiculous things. I'll let my computer be searching for one right quick just to demonstrate what I mean. And yet, with all of this, we can't get anybody to have a discussion with us. And it's just, it's really... it should be getting to individuals in this area, but here's really what takes place. Individuals, rather than actually realize that something's up, the way the mind ends up being manipulated. Say, for instance, when we stood up against the Natural History Museum, there were a lot of people who were watching that, and they were like, wow. I cannot believe that some museum as large as the Natural History Museum, it's one of the largest natural history museums in Virginia. It is funded by the state of Virginia in part, $21 million to build that place, and yet they shut the doors rather than allow us to come through with one of our teachers who's a scientist and and our homeschoolers. The entire Henry County Homeschool Association was going to go through with us, with one of our scientists, and they shut the doors. This was in the early days when they were trying to get all kinds of public they were publicity, and we had Star News follow us up there. We didn't ask them to. They just decided to see what's going to happen. And a lot of people were amazed. And then a paleontologist comes down from Maryland, and he's, giving his lectures, and I go in and challenge him to debate, and he's like, maybe I will. Maybe he won't. You see what I'm saying? These individuals don't have answers. A lot of people say, well, and I'm fine with this. I get it. They say, well, y'all don't really have the notoriety. It's like, sometimes they say, when you best a fool, what have you done? And they look at us and they say, well, he's a fool. That's fine. We just continue to try and get the message out, and our ratings continue to go up, and our YouTube views continue to go up, and persons who know us, it continues to go up. We get radio interviews from overseas, all kinds of different things, and that's, that's fine. But it's still, at some point you would think somebody ought to be willing to champion this stuff, because you got guys, according to y'all, it's so easy to answer. And it's just, when you think about it, the best argument they have is, well, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody sins. Therefore, that means we're born in sin. Well, when you really get down to that, does that really mean that your nature is depraved? Because the doctrine is, in fact, total depravity. When you get right down to it, you're born in sin, you're totally depraved, you're unable, in their terminology, you're unable to save yourself, sometimes they say, but depending on which one of them you read, they're saying that you're not able to always do right. Well, you know what? Here's the thing. You're not able to always do wrong. I challenge you to find anybody in the world that's ever lived that always did something wrong. Every single action, every single thought, every single motivation, intention was always wrong. Now, you might say, well, Genesis 6, they said their imagination was on evil continually. The sum of you is not your imagination. You can actually imagine all the time. Every time you start thinking and imagining, or every time you start imagining things, you may actually be full of lust. The Bible talks about individuals in Jude and 2 Peter that have eyes full of adultery. But that doesn't mean that every single thing you ever did in your life, as a baby, did you ever hug your mother? Well, you may not even know. You know, you might have to ask your mother, did I ever hug you? Did I ever say when I was 3 that I love you, Mama? I mean, is there ever been anybody that all they ever did their entire life was bad? No, there's no such person. Well, total depravity says that you are totally depraved, that there's nothing good in you, that you always end up doing wrong. Not all the time. You see what I'm saying? I'm saying the other side of this thing. Well, if we're not totally depraved, if we're not born sinners, how come we sin? You don't sin all the time. I mean, there's not, as we just said, there's not a person that can say that all their entire life, like from the very moment that they came from the womb, they were just doing evil, idiotic, mean, perverted things. No baby has ever been that way. And it's just so can I say to you, you can't do everything. Let's say you set your mind that I'm just going to do every single thing, every imagination, every moment, every intention, every action, it's going to be bad. You can't do that either. It's just impossible for you not to have a good thought. It's impossible. The worst person in the world is not a person who is always, I'm saying always, doing something bad. It's just not possible. You see, we haven't really even thought this thing through. And so here we are tonight, and we have Romans chapter 5, verse 12 on our screen, and we're asking the question, does this really teach that we're born in sin? Yes, Sharon, what does the Bible say?
Hi, hello, Johnny. I called in Caleb last week and asked him the same question I want to ask you. When it says in verse 12 there, wherefore as by one man sin entered into the world, why couldn't that one man mean Satan, and we just live our lives, you know?
Let me answer it. I heard you call last week. You don't get to just take a word and turn it into another word. I mean, the scripture said, wherefore as by one man. Is Satan a man? Is he ever called a man? Is he ever referred to as a man?
Yes. I think when God sent Satan and Satan's angels followers to earth, he said, let us make man in our own image.
No,
so I figured...
No. That is not a reference to Satan ever. I mean, I don't know what you're quoting that you think that was Satan, but when he said, let us make man, you're again, for some reason, you've decided to put, let us make Satan. He didn't say, let us make Satan. He actually says in another place that they're going to make man a little lower than the angels. Satan is actually an angel. So he's not a man, and you don't get to just switch words. It says flat out, wherefore, as by, so something else happened. And tonight, the easy way to get the meaning of this verse is just to pay attention just for a moment. You notice this word as, and you notice this word so, where there is a comparison taking place here. Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for all have sinned. As it happened to the one man, so it's happened to all the rest of us. That's basically what he's saying, and I can actually prove that to you in another passage that says the same thing in an easier way. Okay? I'm saying that the Bible is saying, as it happened to Adam, so it happens to us, in the same manner. Now watch this. In James chapter 1, verse 13, was Adam tempted? Were Adam and Eve tempted?
Yes.
They were tempted to sin, right?
Yes.
All right, watch this. James 1:13. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God, for God cannot tempt with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But watch this. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then when lust conceives, it bring forth sin. Every man is tempted and drawn away and enticed, and it brings forth sin. Every man. As it happened to Adam, it happens to every man. James 1:14. You see that? That's all Romans 5:12 is saying.
Yes, sir.
I mean, do you really see that? As it happened to Adam, so it happens to us. Now, when you really think about it.
I think the part that that's his own lust and is enticed explains it very well.
Okay. All right. Thank you for calling.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, folks, when persons read often, I mean, it's very, very difficult not to have preconceived thoughts and ideas that have been planted in your mind. You remember what I said about the science teacher in Martinsville? Here he is. I mean, do you realize that he's trying to get his students to go to college? Do you realize that there are all kinds of ways to go to college? You know, you might say, well, they really couldn't go to college. The children he was talking to, the Afro-American children he was talking to, he's an African-American man. He's trying to talk to these high school students, and you may say, well, they couldn't go to college anyway. You know, they didn't have the money. Do you realize how simple it is to go to college? Do you realize that when you are in a particular income bracket, and I'm saying my kids are in this income bracket, I'm not a wealthy individual. The state of Virginia, they make their own college in the state cheaper by half if you go to a state college. If you have a certain income level, you qualify for grants. The individuals who are in the school system will help you to go through that. Other often individuals know people that have already gone to college and gone through the same procedure. They can tell you how this works. I mean, we're not the smartest people in this area. And we know how. We figured out how to get grants and how to, you know, there are people everywhere that are doing this. But why didn't those kids go? You see, I'm trying to make sure that you don't push back and say, well, they couldn't go to college anyway. No. The reason they didn't go to college, the science teacher is a retired science teacher from Martinsville High School. He's had years and years and years of working with African-American students, and he said that they had it made up in their mind already. A seed was planted from the evolutionary teaching that they went through in their science classes that they weren't actually capable. You see how that goes? You have to be very careful. You know, as children, I don't know if everybody knows this song, but a lot of individuals as children, they were taught a little song, oh, be careful little eyes what you see. Oh, be careful little ears what you hear. You know, do you realize how powerful that is? I mean, you just think about Eve here. Eve is every man. Now, when I told the lady who called in that she doesn't get to change the word when it says man, and I'm saying Eve is a man, well, I'm not cheating really on this when you talk about the word man here. The word is not necessarily the case that it is talking about a male. It is a word that can be translated every, any, both, each one, every one, man, woman in particular. You see, it's the word. It's a word that can be translated either way. Everybody. You can just put in there everybody because that Greek word will allow it to be translated everybody, every person, everyone. But every man is tempted. Eve was tempted. And how was she tempted? She heard information that disputed what she had heard God say. If you eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will die. And Satan twisted that around and said, no, you won't die. Be careful what you hear. You see, when something's been planted in your mind, an insidious lie, say for instance that you are close in evolution. I mean, who doesn't believe evolution? All the scientists say evolution is true. Who am I? I'm an African American. I'm going through high school. And this guy was teaching mostly in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. There was great disparity in the 70s, much more so than now, and in the 80s, much more so than now. And, you know, basically all the scientific community is saying evolution is true. God is dead. Who am I to doubt that I'm actually closer in the ancestry as far as evolution is concerned to our cousins, the gorilla or the chimpanzee? Caucasians are just a little bit higher up the line according to Darwin, And they're like, who are we to say that that's not true? You see that insidious lie being planted, and as a result, you don't even realize that it's mastering your life. It's dictating your decisions. Same thing with born in sin. When individuals are told that they're born in sin, why would they behave differently than the way they've been taught? And there are different churches out there that teach this in different degrees, but that's not what the Bible teaches. I want you to just think just with me tonight. Let's let one of our resident, I'm just going to say this, our resident scholars is the way we're going to couch this tonight. This is going to be Dan Parker. We're going to let him tell us basically what we need to know about born in sin. I want to let you listen to him as he debates with me, and we're going to answer this really quickly because it's fairly simple. Take a listen.
The remedy is stronger than the disease. Johnny is trying to make the symptoms the cause. Johnny, if you had a terrible, horrific headache and you went to the doctor and the doctor examined you and he said, Johnny, your headache is causing your headache, I don't believe you'd go back to him.
Now, you know, the crazy thing about this is exactly what he's saying. I was telling Dan Parker, and I'm telling all of you, do you realize that when you put born in sin off on God, you in fact make the curse stronger than the cure? What do I mean by that? Well, is it the case that Jesus is the Son of God and that Jesus came to destroy the power of the devil and to take away his claim over death and remove our fear of death? Well, yes, that's what the Bible says. For as much then as children are partakers of flesh and blood, he also likewise took part of the same, that through death he might destroy him that had the power of death, and to deliver them who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. Now, we're basically hearing right here that Jesus is stronger than the devil. You see that? That through death he might destroy him that had the power of death, that is the devil. Well, he didn't destroy it. They're basically, their curse is stronger than Jesus' cure. What do you mean by that? Well, once you are saved, once you've been redeemed according to their doctrine, you can't pass it on. Your children will still be cursed in Adam. What? You're basically making the curse of Satan stronger than the cure of Christ? We have sin, according to them, passed on through every generation, but once we become a saved individual, once we become a saint, a redeemed individual, regenerated, according to their doctrine, I don't believe their doctrine of regeneration anyway, the way they teach it, but you can't pass it on. And then they come up with this crazy idea, you know why you can't pass it on? Well, it's kind of like a donkey and a horse, I'm just going to use the biblical term, a jackass and a horse. Okay? The ass that you see in the Bible, a particular kind of animal, a burro, and a horse. When they mate, you get a mule. You see, that's a hybrid. And the mule cannot reproduce. That's what they say. When you become a Christian, you're a hybrid. You can't reproduce yourself, and your children actually are still tainted by Adam's sin. Are you kidding me? That is a sophisticated way of trying to get out of the simple truth that we're telling you, is that you're making Satan stronger than Jesus. The curse that he supposedly put upon mankind, Jesus cannot cure it. And so then Dan Parker tries to come up with this crazy idea that I'm saying that the reason that you sin is because you're a sinner. Excuse me, that's what they say. Now, folks, tonight, can I just get you to think? Let me give you the names first. Erasmus, Jacob Arminius, and Pelagius. These are three names: Pelagius, Erasmus, and Jacob Arminius. Pelagius lived about 400 AD. Jacob Arminius lived in somewhere in that time frame, 1700s, and Erasmus lived in 14 and 1500. Late 1400s into the 1500s. He was contemporary. He was about 65 when Luther was pushing his faith only, born in sin. Now, the reason I'm bringing these two individuals up, remember this, Pelagius, Erasmus, and Jacob Arminius. They are very famous trio of individuals who opposed born in sin. They taught that we have free will. Now, let me just give you a thought here just for a minute. As far as thinking about the idea of, okay, well, Johnny, you're saying that we're not born in sin. Why do we sin? Can I tell you this? Can I just get you to think about this tonight? Do you realize that in order not to ever sin, just to even be in the realm of not possibly ever committing a sin, I mean, just to even get that as a remote possibility, do you realize you'd have to know every sin? You ever stop and think about that? Okay, I want to put forth the position and draw a scenario where a person never sins. Johnny, I want you to come up with somebody that never sinned. You know what? In order for a person never to sin, number one, you would have to know every sin. Who in the world knows every sin? You see, you would actually have to be omnipotent in the first place. I'm sorry I used the word omnipotent, but it means to know everything. You would have to be a person who knows everything, or let's give another possibility. Now, I know we're running out of time here tonight. Let me give you another possibility, and I want you to think on this, and we're going to discuss this in some other broadcasts. There is another possibility. You could be in a position, or you could design a position where there was no law, because the law worketh wrath. Where no law is, there is no transgression. You would have to be in a scenario where there is no actual law in the first place for you to transgress, and then you would not sin. But there's not going to be a situation like that. Even the Garden of Eden, there was a law, at least one, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. You don't touch it. You don't eat it. But you see, in order for you to not ever sin, one of the qualifications is going to be you have to know every sin. Now, how could you do that? How could you be a person who knows every single thing that could possibly be a sin? You can't be that person. You see, you would actually have to be omnipotent. You would have to be all-knowing. You'd have to know every single thing that is ever considered to be wrong in order for you to be a person who starts out saying, okay, I'm going to be sinless. Oh, yeah? So you're telling me you know every prospect of possibility of an infraction against God? No, I don't. Do you realize that in the Old Testament alone, there are 600 some odd different laws in the Old Testament itself? And, I mean, do you know them? 613, do you think you could memorize all of them? I know you could read them. See what we're talking about? In order for you to be a person who never sinned, you're going to have to start out saying, you know what, I know what all sins are. In order to say that you know every sin, what you have that kind of knowledge of the will of God, the complete knowledge of the will of God, you're going to have to be omnipotent. Tonight, folks, question these things. Get on the internet if you're using it. Use it for something good. Look up a gentleman named Pelagius. Look up a gentleman named Jacob Arminius. Look up a gentleman named Erasmus, and we'll touch on this in another show. And until then, get your preacher to come on and debate me on this. I guarantee you that you're not going to get him with all of his knowledge and all of his information. He won't, and free airtime too. We'll be giving him free airtime. You won't have him running to take this because these guys actually don't have the truth. Here's my cell phone number, 276-806-2150, and perhaps you get one of those preachers who will. There's my cell phone number, 2150-806-2150. Micah's 429-5221. That's in Danville area code, 429-5221. And here's Caleb's phone number. It is 806-3641, 276-806-3641. Thanks for watching tonight. Hope you find one of those preachers. Always ask for, what does the Bible say?
The views expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect the views of the station, its employees, or ownership.
I know that you're a good person, so I just wanted to come by and let you know that I know this.